Well, good afternoon, everyone. Want to thank everyone for coming this afternoon. We have a really great series for you in the month of February here on sales and revenue, e-commerce, and really optimizing your client relationships. So today we're going to kick this off with myself, Paula Biltmore, and Nabil. And we're going to talk to you a lot about how to develop those client relationships through CRM systems, and also how to understand important metrics and data around how to actually evaluate that information. But first and foremost, we are SCORE. If you don't know who we are, we're a nationwide organization, part of the SBA. So happy that you've joined us this afternoon. Now, SCORE is such a great organization. We're so happy that you're joining us. Over 300 chapters, 11,000 volunteers nationwide. And SCORE was established to help small businesses, whether you're looking at, starting a business or opening a business, growing your business, or if you're looking at exiting your business, we're here to help. We do have mentors that can work with you one-on-one on developing your strategic plan and also looking at how you can grow your business successfully. In addition to workshops like this, you do have that option for the one-on-one. So we're super excited that you're here today and taking that step. And we couldn't do this without our community partners. We certainly are excited to thank them. Without their support, we wouldn't be here in providing you these workshops and also the mentoring. So we do appreciate all of their support. A little bit about Nabil. Nabil, I refer to him as an expert. He doesn't like that term, but certainly someone with in-depth knowledge with respect to the technology aspect of growing your business and understanding your business. And there's a lot of information that you can glean from him with respect to data science and really optimizing data resources. So he's going to talk with us today about marketing metrics and sales metrics and how to actually use that data to drive your marketing and sales decisions and processes. So we're super excited to have him here with us today. His background is very varied, from engineering and management positions. But honestly, he has a very deep skill set around finance, operations, marketing, and IT. He has his bachelor's degree in electrical engineering. So he is also a math magician, I call him. He really understands how to use quantitative data to make good decisions for your business. So that's super important. And then my background is primarily in consulting. I've used a lot of client relationship management softwares, so I know and understand the importance of that, and I can bring you a little bit more insight on a more personal level too, in showing you the applicability for your business. So we're both excited to be here. Nabil, welcome. I know that you're here on the call. I want to just say welcome, and we're so happy that you're here with us today. Now, first and foremost, we do utilize the business model canvas. And if you're not familiar with this tool, you really should become familiar with it. This is actually the platform that we use for helping businesses with a lean strategic plan. And we're going to be focusing on the channels aspect of this portion of the business model canvas. But when you look at this component, you really want to focus on, those channels that are going to give you optimization for sales. And that's a primary driver for us in what we're going to talk about today. So just understand that this does flow into your strategic plan. We did spend our entire month of January in the workshops that we did going over the unique selling proposition side of this and the marketing side of this. So if you didn't have a chance to see those presentations on the marketing side, those are available through SCORE Minnesota, and that's another great resource for you. So first and foremost, to kind of launch us off here, we really want you to focus on what your growth focus is. There is a difference between linear growth and scaling your business. And understanding that difference is something that we're going to help you with today. But you need to know where you're focused. If you're looking at just linear growth, if you're looking at, investing the same amount of time and getting, maybe some small returns on investment, maybe your current sales strategy is referral based only, you're going to have just a straight linear growth. But if you're looking at something that is more exponential, that's where we're going to come in and provide you with the tools and the processes to kind of get you there. Now, these tools can also be used for linear growth. It's not that it's, exclusive to exponential growth. You do need these tools for both. However, you can incorporate these tools and experience exponential growth if you truly take a deep dive into each of them and develop a better understanding of the processes. And one of those processes really is the customer journey and looking at how to optimize revenue within that journey. So as we look at this chart here, you want to understand there is a starting point here. When you're looking at optimizing that customer relationship, you're starting with building awareness and building awareness around your business and the products and services that you might provide. And when you look at that purple section, your public relations, your advertising, how you're building a brand for yourself and building awareness around who you are is the first step in that customer journey, then becoming aware of you. And then as they move forward into consideration, now maybe they're engaging with you a little bit more. Maybe they're looking at your social media posts. Maybe they're actually reading through some direct mail pieces that you've sent them or some emails that you've sent to them. They're actually looking into and considering the products and services that you're actually providing. And then as we move into the next step, which is where all of us want to be, right? The purchase section. Once a customer actually becomes a customer, this is still a process in orchestrating, this decision for the customer so that you don't have buyer's remorse, so that you do have a quality sale there. And then as we move into customer retention and building loyalty, there are facets there as well that you need to be focused on. And finally is, the optimal result is advocacy and getting our clients to actually advocate for us and refer people to us. And that word of mouth advertising, we know, is where we're going to get some of our best customers. But these pieces are in many ways really the catalyst for your customer journey and that process. And Nabil, is there anything you want to add here?
Hi, Paula. Yes, thank you for the introduction. Good afternoon, everybody. I just want to mention here that the journey is actually a process, and that process needs to be streamlined and optimized. So it becomes repeatable, and you could maximize your revenue and your return on investment. So in order to do that, you need to be able to measure, track, analyze, optimize, and repeat all over again. You want to document that process from the beginning to the very end, and you want to make sure that your employees, both on the marketing and on the sales side, are properly trained to implement that process. So it should not be an ad hoc process that you implement based on your whims or what your budgets may allow for a certain time. It has to be very well thought out and orchestrated. And I want to remind everybody that if you cannot measure something, it's going to be very hard for you to improve it and scale it particularly. So therefore, knowing your metrics is of paramount importance, and your ability to scale and succeed is going to depend tremendously on that. And we're going to be covering those metrics in a few minutes.
Great. Yeah, I mean, the tasks and the tools that we're going to look at, definitely they need to be well mapped out. And I appreciate you, focusing on that, Nabil, because having that defined process to optimize the customer journey is a huge step towards increasing revenue, right? And that's really what we're trying to do. We're trying to help folks with that bottom line and that return on investment. So some of the things that you really want to take a look at, some of those tools and the steps that are necessary to take within those tools are embedded into this client relationship management concept. And if you're not familiar with that term, you do want to spend some time and Google that. There are a lot of client relationship management tools out there, and their primary purpose is to help you in nurturing and optimizing your leads. So as you look at this chart, segmenting your leads into categories: suspect, prospect, account, client, etc., that will help you within your CRM system to then develop a contact or communication plan for each of those segments. And what I mean by that is the contact and communication that you want to have with each of these leads, whether they're in the sales process or whether they're in the nurturing process, may be different. And when you segment those leads out into these various categories, you're going to be able to sit down and truly identify what kind of contact you want to have with these various segmented leads. And that's something that can truly optimize your revenue, because maybe you have a lot of folks that are in this nurturing process. And Nabil, you talk about this so well in terms of these low priority folks. They might be a low priority, but staying in front of them and actually looking at these two processes, timing is critical. Consistent visibility is critical. Now, the nurturing process can be something that's more automated, whereas the sales process may be something that's more hands-on. But you definitely want to have within your client relationship management software the segmentation of these leads and a contact plan that's affiliated with both of them. Anything you want to add here, Nabil?
Yeah, I fully agree with what you just said. And bottom line is, in this slide that I want to point out is both processes depend heavily on the fact that you have leads. So if you're still struggling in creating leads, perhaps the workshops that we recorded, the live streams we recorded last month, needs to be revisited, because without leads, none of those processes could be implemented.
Absolutely. And, when we look at the tools for CRM, and we'll talk about some of those tools, there are a lot of platforms that you can explore with relationship to the CRM tool. That being said, they're pretty much all the same. They have a lot of varying features and benefits, but the tools themselves will provide you with the same kind of structure and process that we're talking about, and really having that process well defined. Now, as we talk about that, some of those processes, some of those CRM systems, looking at MS Dynamics, Salesforce, HubSpot, these are all tools that I've used in the past. I like Salesforce. I like HubSpot. Currently, I'm using iSales, which I really like that CRM tool. Do you have any specific CRMs that you've used, Nabil, that you've found some success with?
Yeah, I've used extensively Microsoft Dynamics. I've recently started using HubSpot. Many of our score clients don't want to pay for the CRM cost. Microsoft Dynamics and Salesforce costs, I think, roughly around $80 per month per user. HubSpot has a freemium model where you could sign up and start using it for free. You could send up to 2,000 emails for free. You could have unlimited number of contacts in there, and there is sufficient functionality to get you going. So I would highly recommend for anybody that doesn't have a CRM that is generating leads, if you don't want these leads to fall through the cracks, if you want to establish a process, both sales and nurturing process, look into acquiring one of these products. And if your budget doesn't allow, definitely look into HubSpot CRM.
Yeah, and many of them do have a free trial so that you can try these out without any obligation. But I think the key piece here is, as we move into these metrics and as we look at lead conversion rates, you're going to need a tool like this. It's a non-negotiable. So you really do need to have that as a form function for these processes. Also, another sales and marketing tool that's significant and important is your website. And Nabil, maybe you can talk to this a little bit more, because this is another cost point for folks. And, as a startup, maybe they're looking at some free websites. But I would like you to talk about that, and maybe a little bit more specifically about WordPress.
Yeah, the majority of small businesses, if my memory is accurate, About 70% of small businesses use WordPress. WordPress is an open source platform. WordPress.org is for free. And the beauty about it is ubiquitous. There's been tons of applications that have been developed for it. So a lot of plugins that are free or pretty inexpensive for small businesses to acquire that pretty much make the sky the limit in terms of all the capabilities that you could have. So you're not limited to a certain private proprietary tool that only gives you access when they feel that certain features or benefits are needed. However, WordPress does require a little bit maintenance, so that's kind of the drawback to it, but it's not that costly to maintain it. And people with some technical skill, they could handle that on their own. In addition to WordPress, obviously, there are a lot of other tools, but we strongly recommend that small businesses consider WordPress because of its ubiquity and the fact that there's a lot of applications that plug into it. And some of the applications that we recommend are listed here. And we definitely recommend for small businesses to connect to Google Analytics and Search Console so we could track the metrics and be able to come up with the right data for our KPIs.
Yeah, one of the primary concerns that I've heard from small businesses about WordPress is, they get scared. They're like, do I need to be a coder when it comes to WordPress? And there are platforms that utilize WordPress. I know GoDaddy has a WordPress option for site building. So if you're not really savvy on building websites, you can use the GoDaddy platform, which makes it kind of a plug and play type of opportunity. But as you build your business and it becomes a little bit more complex, and maybe you need to have an e-commerce plugin where you're selling things on your site, that gives a website developer the opportunity to still have the coding side there. And I think that that's significant for small businesses to understand. You want to choose tools that will help you now and in the future as you start to grow.
Yeah, most internet service providers do support WordPress. It doesn't just have to be with GoDaddy. GoDaddy, they have their own website builder as well. I just want to make sure people realize there's a difference between the two.
Yeah, there is a difference between the two, and you do have those two options on that platform as well. Anytime I'm doing a site, I will always choose WordPress. I mean, it just gives you a lot more capability because you can grow with that. Also, reaching more into the customer experience. Do you want to talk a little bit more about, surveys and that kind of stuff?
Yeah, I mean, it's important for every business to keep their finger on the pulse of the customer. Customer experience is extremely important. The way you do that, obviously, if you're dealing with the consumer, you want to survey as many times and as many of your clients as possible so that you get the feedback. You want to monitor your Facebook insights, all the metrics on Facebook or other social media. And if there are tickets that are being created by your clients, Zendesk is another tool that's very popular where you could keep track of all those tickets and address them. If you're using some of the other CRMs like Microsoft Dynamics and Salesforce, they also have a support portal implemented within their solution as well.
Fantastic. And then obviously in this day and age, we're all spending a lot more time on video conferencing, and there are a lot of tools here. What's the significance here in these video conferencing tools, Nabil?
I mean, particularly now, we're all become experts with using these tools. There's a slew of them that you could use. And with the pandemic going on, we have the opportunity to meet less and less with our clients. So take the opportunity to connect with your clients if you can, particularly if you're dealing with businesses. You may not be able to meet with them in person, face-to-face, but definitely you could do that over Zoom or any of those solutions that are available out there. So take advantage of that and stay connected with your customer.
Mm-hmm. As you're building your contact plan too, for each of those lead segments that we talked about, you can include video conferencing as, one of the contacts that you have with them, because, not having that option for face-to-face meetings, this does give you that opportunity back. And I think it's significant and truly important and valuable as we build businesses. Moving into e-commerce, Nabil, I mean, this is such a huge, huge venue. Great tool.
Yeah, and next week is going to be dedicated to talk about e-commerce and how to set up WordPress with WooCommerce. WooCommerce is a plugin that's very popular with WordPress, or a Shopify website. Jeremy's going to present on those topics, and he's going to go through quite a bit of depth about how to set up these websites and how to keep track of your metrics within those websites, which are going to be essential, obviously, for you to be able to figure out how to scale your business. But you don't necessarily have to have your own website to be able to sell online. You could sell through third parties' websites such as Amazon, eBay, Etsy, and many others.
And understand, folks, there is a common thread here. You know, we are looking at all of these tools because we can use them as digital channels. And one of the things Nabil talks about is getting more data and having better data to make better decisions. You know, can you talk a little bit about search engine marketing?
Yeah, search engine marketing has come a long way over the years. When I started my business, we had very little tools to be able to keep track of the data other than Google Analytics. And it was quite confusing, and you couldn't deduce the necessary information that you needed in order to scale your business. But right now, there's a myriad of solutions out there. I've used SEMrush significantly over the past 6 years. It's an amazing tool. There's another one called RX, as well as Moz. But there are also some free solutions out there, Keyword Planner and a lot of other tools available from Google for free. But definitely look into acquiring some of these tools, particularly if you're going to be heavily involved in marketing your services over digital channels, such as organically through search engine optimization, for instance, or through social media or email campaigns or referrals coming through other websites.
Social media. I mean, this is a giant one. Let's talk about that. Not just social media in general, but also online advertising and the data and metrics we can get there as well.
Yeah, so there are a lot of social media platforms, and businesses are trying to figure out what platforms work best for them. They may want to be have their services or value propositions available on these different platforms. So there are some tools out there that could help you manage posting on different platforms. It will help you schedule these postings. It will help you monitor all the feedback and the reviews that you're getting on these platforms. So you have a better ability to manage your time and maximize your exposure on all these different social media platforms. And in the previous session that Jeremy presented, he talked about the different social media platforms that are available and described some of the pros and cons. You could go back and review that session if you want to learn more about social media platforms. Online advertising obviously is an option through social media. With Facebook Ad Manager, you could start campaigns on Facebook, Instagram, Instant Messenger, as well as all the Facebook partnering, the partners, network partners. And also you could look into Google or Bing pay-per-click or advertising platforms that they have right now. They're quite sophisticated, and it enables you to reach a very specific target market or access people that are looking for very specific set of keywords which could match or map to your value proposition.
And then finally looking at email and then the world of cybersecurity.
Right. So email continues to be one of the least expensive medium to use. It's an extremely important digital channel to take advantage of. It still has the highest return on investment, despite of all the spam filters and the barrage of email that people are getting. If you do it right, it's still a very effective method of reaching your audience. Many of you that are attending today's event have received the newsletter from us. You've probably received the text reminding you about us. You've received also different type of communications. So email is definitely an instrumental part, an essential part of your digital channel mix, and you should constantly look at ways to utilize it. Now, if you have a CRM in place, you could set up a workflow that could be triggered automatically to send emails for your prospective clients or low priority leads, if you wish. Try to nurture them and move them up the sales pipeline. And if you want to do that, a lot of these CRM tools give you the tools necessary in order to build these campaigns and that kind of workflow. And if you don't want to use your company or Gmail or whatever email service that you have, you could purchase either SendGrid or Mailgun. They're pretty inexpensive, about $15 a month, and you could send thousands and thousands of emails. And their servers are qualified, so it's less likely that your email will be blocked when you use their services. If you're not using a CRM package, we still highly recommend that you do, but Constant Contact, MailChimp, and Drip could be options that enable you to send email in a bulk fashion. And lastly, Paula, cybersecurity is important because everybody nowadays is using computers and these digital platforms and the software applications that go on them. So we're exposing ourselves to potential attacks. So therefore, it's very important that we protect ourselves with tools that block viruses, malware, ransomware, or phishing attacks on our computers and hardware and software. Also, it's very important to back up our data and information on a regular basis, and there are solutions out there that are very inexpensive. For a couple of dollars a month, you could back up your entire disk drive on OneDrive or on Google Drive or iCloud. Also, you may want to consider, if you don't have a secure socket layer, that's what converts the HTTP in your website URL to HTTPS. That makes an encrypted peer-to-peer communication, so people cannot snoop on what you're trying to communicate with your clients and steal credit card numbers or other sensitive information. Virtual private network continue to be important. There's a lot of tools out there, inexpensive, that you could use. And Tor is an option to replace Chrome or Safari or any of your browsers that will give you a little more security and more privacy.
You know, Nabil, all of these tools and looking at how we are selling and marketing to our customers and taking them through this journey. You know, one of the things that you and I have talked about is that, you know, as we use these tools and dive deep into these digital channels, you know, it's much easier to store and track and get data to help us in determining those key metrics for running marketing campaigns, determining, you know, which social media advertising is working the best for us. So I really want to take some time and talk about that with you, because that bit of information to me is catalyzing to changing how folks are doing business, right? Because this is a key piece that drives that sales and marketing process.
Right, and the fact that we're using digital channels, just the fact that they're called digital, basically we're talking bits and bytes, zeros and ones, and the fact that they are digital, that enables us to store them on computers. And when you have data that you could store, you could easily analyze it, process it, streamline it, and figure out the proper metrics and how to improve those metrics over time. So that's the beauty of digital channels. Their ability to enable us to be able to access all that data and process it and use it to our advantage.
Yeah, as we jump into this, I know, you know, in our previous workshops, we talked about the unique selling proposition. So I don't want to spend a lot of time here, but I do want you to spend a little bit of time going through this and just explaining to folks these various channels, how they work together with target marketing and the unique selling proposition.
Right. So the question here is, does your business have a scalable engine of growth? And it's not enough that you have an engine of growth. I mean, that's great if you do, but it's important also that it's scalable. And we talked last month about the importance of defining your value proposition, articulating it, and identifying specifically what your unique selling proposition is, so that you could bubble up on that first page of Google, which is extremely important to drive organic traffic to your website. We also talked about defining your target market, figuring out exactly who your customers are, trying to identify them demographically, psychographically, and divide them up into persona or avatars, if you wish. So the idea here is that you want your channels to communicate your value proposition to your target clients. And the more channels that you have that does that, the more equipped you are to create that engine of growth. And you don't just want to have one channel present, because you never know what happens. I mean, if you're depending on Google, for instance, to drive organic traffic to your website, Google can overnight change its algorithms and pull the rug from underneath you. If you just depend on social media Facebook, for instance, may change its algorithms, and suddenly you're not getting the organic traffic, or your advertising is not going where it needs to be. So you have to be thinking about having at least 2 of these channels firing for you, working for you, generating leads for you, preferably 3.
Absolutely. And I think most people probably have more than 3 working for them now, but how do we actually figure out now what is working and what's not working? So let's dive into these metrics a little bit more and talk about this first metric, the customer acquisition cost. You want to chat about this a little bit and explain this metric?
Yeah, so for each of your channels, you want to try to figure out what your customer acquisition cost is. And ideally, what you want to do here is figure out what is the actual expenditure that you're putting out in terms of both sales and marketing, divided by the total number of new customers that you're getting. So as a general number for your customer acquisition cost, figure out your marketing and sales expenditures, divide it up by the total number of your customers. That will give you an average of what it costs you to acquire each customer.
Nabil, talk about why this is important for folks. And the other piece I want you to talk about is ensuring that people are measuring their time, because that's an issue that I see with all small businesses. They forget to calculate into this equation their own time and the expense of that.
Right. So it's important that that number is comprehensive of all the expenses, and small businesses, typically individuals that are running them, they may not factor in their own time when they calculate that. The problem with not factoring in a person's time is that your time is not scalable. Your time is limited to 24 hours a day, and most likely you're not going to be able to use that entire time for your business. So if you're thinking about scaling, you have to account for that time, because you can't clone yourself. And at some point, you're going to have to hire somebody else to do that work if you want to scale it. So it's important that you factor in every single cost that's involved in generating those new customers, so you have a reasonably accurate customer acquisition cost. An example here, Paula, we have like a landscaping example for a company that we use throughout this presentation. Let's say they're spending about $20,000, let's say $10,000 in marketing, $10,000 in sales per year, in order to generate new customers, new leads and new customers. So if they're spending $20,000 a year and they're generating 10 new clients out of that, their customer acquisition cost is 20,000 divided by 10 equal to about $2,000.
Okay, that makes perfect sense. And then, the next metric that we want to take a look at, this particular one is really significant, and I want you to talk about how you derive this.
Yeah, so that's the average revenue per customer. You want to know roughly how much money each customer is giving you every year. And in order to do that, you take out your total revenue that you're generating every year, and you divide it by the number of your customers. That will give you a rough number of what the average amount of each client spending with you. Now, again, here, there's a caveat. You have to be careful. If you're selling different types of services to different client segments, you may want to separate those different segments and figure out a different ARPC for each. So for instance, in this case, Paula, a landscaping example, if their total revenues per year is about $200,000 and they have 130 clients, the average revenue that they're getting per customer is $1,500. Now, okay. I want to qualify this a little bit. So assume, for instance, that this landscaping company work mainly with homeowners and they landscape their yards, but they have a couple of large clients, and those large clients could potentially be a homeowner association, for instance, or maybe a commercial business, and they're generating a lot more revenue from these 2 clients. The idea here is to separate those 2 buckets of clients, because they're really 2 different persona, and then create an RPC for each, because that then will give you a much better idea of what each of those type of clients will generate in terms of revenue for you each year. And the other thing to consider also, and that is, if you have an outlier of a client, remove the outliers in order to give you more of the norm, the actual norm, as opposed to just an average. It will give you a lot more meaningful number at the end when you're measuring that metric.
So before we take a deeper dive into this next metric, I just want to let folks know that we do have a spreadsheet that we're going to send to you where this information becomes very simple as a plug and play device because Nabil is our math magician. So we appreciate you doing that for us, Nabil. Let's talk about this metric and take a deeper dive here.
Okay, yeah, and that spreadsheet will contain all that math, so we'll do the calculations automatically for you once we send it. So average customer lifespan, it's important to know how long the customer stays with you. So going back to the previous two metrics, for instance, if my customer acquisition cost is $2,000 and I'm only getting $1,500 from a client, I mean, that's not a good deal. I'm losing money every time I'm gaining a client. But if that client stays with me for 5, 6, 7, 10 years, then there's a potential for me to make money in the long term. And that's where this metric becomes important. You want to know how long that client is staying with you. And the way you figure this out is you take your churn rate. This is the attrition rate, the percentage of clients that leave you every year. And then you take one and you divide it by the churn rate, and that gives you your average customer lifespan. So in our landscaping example, if we're losing 15% of our clients every year, our average customer lifespan is 7 years. So on average, each client stays with us for about 7 years.
And then finally, as we dive into the customer lifetime, this particular metric I think is so profound in really getting that bigger picture under control.
Right, and that gives you a comprehensive number of what each customer could potentially spend with you over their lifespan. So that's what we call the customer lifetime value, CLV. You take the average revenue per customer, multiply it by the average customer lifespan. So if the client is spending with us $1,500 a year and they're staying for 7 years, we're making about $10,000 out of that client in their entire lifespan. So now you look at it in perspective to your customer acquisition cost. If it costs you $2,000 to acquire a client that's spending $10,000 with you, even if it is over 7 years, that's still a reasonable investment. So it is worth it to spend that kind of money. And this is where a lot of the small businesses lose focus. They look at the $2,000 number, which we calculated first, the customer acquisition cost, and say, wow, that's way too much. I'm a landscaper. I'm not going to go out and spend $2,000 to win a new client, because I could potentially lose them after 1 year or within a few months. I'm going to be avoiding that kind of expenditure. That's a small business thinking that sometimes hinders businesses from scaling their businesses.
And then finally, as we look at verifying this information, we're going to tie all this together for you folks, but talk about verifying the customer acquisition costs, Nabil.
Right. So like I mentioned, a lot of small businesses, they don't factor in their own time, or they don't think long-term in terms of what is the actual value of acquiring a new client. So when they calculate the customer acquisition cost, it comes out to be very small. And that's all they want to invest to gain new leads or gain new clients. This equation here gives you a first order method in order to calculate roughly what you could potentially spend to acquire a new customer. So if you know what your customer lifetime value, and in this case for landscaping business, let's say it is 10,000, it is reasonable to spend about a quarter of that on an acquisition cost for a customer. Okay, so 10,000 divided by 4, that's $2,500. It is very reasonable to spend $2,500 to acquire a new customer in the landscaping industry. That may sound too much, but that's how you figure it out. Now, why are we dividing by 4?
That was going to be my question.
I mean, that number could vary depending on the industry or depending on a specific situation for a business. To keep it simple, we're saying, okay, we're going to allocate a quarter of that value that each client is going to bring in over the longevity of them being a client. We're going to divide a quarter of it to acquiring that customer, quarter of it to delivering the service, actually doing the landscaping and the manicuring of the lawn and the shrubs, a quarter of it for the overhead, which involve acquiring assets, paying rent, paying our accountant or our lawyer and utility bills, and then the last quarter as a profit to the business owner. So that's a very simple rule that we're applying to say, look, if you divide by 4, roughly your customer acquisition costs should be, in this case, about $2,500, which justifies the initial calculation that we had of $2,000.
Of $2,000. Yeah, I mean, this all just makes so much sense to me in terms of the importance and how this really impacts our choices with respect to sales and marketing. So you want to talk a little bit about that?
Yeah, so now that you know roughly what your customer acquisition costs should be, you could make better decisions of where to invest your money, whether you're going to invest it in marketing or in sales or not invest any money at all, depending on what your CAC is. So if your customer acquisition cost is closer to the lower end of that scale, which is around $1 to $10, you basically have no money whatsoever to do, not even the basic marketing stuff. Your hope is that your concept, your value proposition will go viral, either through the network effect. So that's basically word of mouth on social media or any other channels. And then virally, just like unfortunately how the pandemic is spreading these days, you want your value proposition to spread like wildfire, and people will pick up the message and they become customers. But as your customer acquisition costs start increasing in value, you start having a little more abilities to advertise. And if it is around $50 to $500, for instance, now you have some money that you could invest in marketing, definitely not in sales, but in marketing. So you could invest in advertising on marketing with marketing channels such as like social media or pay-per-click. And then based on that advertising, hopefully you could convert the leads directly to sales without having to need a salesperson that walks them through that sales process. As you move up that scale, you get to the dead zone. That's as defined by Peter Thiel. I basically stole that graph from his book, 0 to 1. You get to that dead zone, and this is typically when you start you're selling to small businesses as opposed to selling to consumers. And we see a lot of our score clients stuck in that scale from the lower end all the way to the dead zone. We don't often work with score clients that are beyond the 10,000 and on. That's typically relegated to the much larger companies. But many of my clients come to me and say, you know, Nabil, I'm struggling to figure out where I should invest money, if I should hire a salesperson or if I should invest more in marketing. And that's basically the art of figuring out where to invest your money in that dead zone. And our landscaping example falls right in the middle of that. So usually my answer to them is don't hire any salespeople unless you have enough leads that justifies you hiring them. So if you're going to hire a person and then expect them to generate their own leads, they're both doing marketing and sales for you. That person may be quite expensive to acquire and retain on a full-time basis. But if you have figured out how to create those engines of growth and scale them, you could invest more money in marketing, create the leads, and as the leads materialize and you put them through your CRM and you realize, yeah, I can't keep up with the demand, then that's the time when you start investing in sales. And potentially inside sales would be the first place where you would start.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I love this example, and Peter Thiel and this 0 to 1. There's a lot of great information there. I think the nomenclature is a little bit confusing in the dead zone. I call it the question zone, because you really have to ask yourself some hard questions there and understand that all the things that we're providing for you, you know, these metrics, it's shifting you into a more quantitative, you know, driven decision-making process. We're looking at how do we make better decisions based on all this data that we can gather. And I think that that's a huge piece here as we look at the question zone. You know, there's a lot of data that's going to help you in making that determination.
Yeah, all these metrics are going to be essential for you to figure out exactly how to budget your marketing budgets and your sales. in order to generate that incremental revenue that you're trying to generate at the end. And this is a very important metric as well, Paula.
Yeah, I mean, looking at lead conversion rates, I mean, this to me is where the rubber meets the road. When you're looking at how much money you're spending on leads and what's the conversion rate for those, it truly helps you in making better decisions.
Yes, I mean, it's easily calculated. If you're getting enough clients and enough leads, you could come up with an average that could be meaningful for you. And the other thing that I want to point out here is if you could potentially compare with your industry whether you're converting enough leads to sales or not. You may not be satisfied, like the case we're giving here is a 5% conversion rate. That landscaping company had 200 leads, they only got 10 clients. That may not be sufficient. So you could look deeper into your sales processes to see, can I improve my conversion rate? So without creating any new leads, you'll be able to create new clients.
Absolutely. Yeah, I really truly value this particular metric, and we'll talk a little bit more about right here. I love this cost per lead. Can you talk a little bit about that? This is where it all comes together for me.
Right. So that's the bottom line. You want to figure out what is your cost per lead, and that cost per lead, by the way, could be different for different channels that you pursue. But the way you calculate it is your customer acquisition cost multiplied by your lead conversion rate. That will tell you what your customer per lead is. And in this example here, my acquisition cost is $2,500. Conversion rate is 5%. So $125. That's what each lead is going to cost me. Now, knowing that what that cost is, I could derive now a marketing and sales budget based on all these metrics that I have, given what I want to grow my business with, the percentage that I want to grow my business with.
Absolutely. And the CRM system also, with this lead conversion rate, understand that when you start using a CRM system and you can label where your leads are coming from, you can see which leads are converting. And that's a huge measure of that process, and that tool is using your CRM to help you in measuring those pieces.
Yeah, very good point.
And now, this is the final slide in optimizing the resources. This is where it all comes together. We've provided all these metrics, we've provided these tools for folks. Let's talk about this. Is your CPL where it needs to be? That's a really hard question to answer, but not so hard. You want to talk about that, Nabil?
Yeah, and that's where SCORE comes into play, actually. I mean, our mentors are experienced. They deal with multiple businesses. We have access to data through the local libraries like Mergent Intellect, where we could actually look at industry metrics and see, is it reasonable? I mean, we could sit down and talk to you and walk you through the process of thinking through, does that cost per lead make sense for your business? Are you ready to scale, given that that's what you're experiencing?
And as you look at the industry too, I mean, pulling in industry metrics and seeing if you're within range within your industry, I think that's another huge piece that we provide through mentoring. But also accounting for both the sales and marketing spending. We've talked about this a little bit. Any final comments on that?
Yeah, again, SCORE mentors will take a much higher view than the business person that's down there trying to make things happen. So we will pull you out of the nitty-gritty and make you think, look at the big picture. And if you're not considering some of the costs that you may consider that it's zero or nil for you, we'll talk to you about that. Make sure that that is accounted for. So when you're scaling, you're not blindsided by some of these costs.
Yeah, I think that's a huge piece in terms of mentoring. And also when I was doing consulting, a lot of people that own their own business spend so much time working in the business, they don't have an opportunity to work on the business. And that's a huge shift that needs to take place. If you're looking at scaling your business, you're going to need to take that time to work on the business. Looking at these different lead generation methods and channels, have you taken an opportunity to do that? I think a lot of folks, they don't necessarily quote unquote have the time to do that, but it's important to take the time to look at that and look at those sales and marketing tools that Nabil went over. Are you getting consistent quality leads across your lead generation campaigns? And this is something that I deal with on a day in and day out basis, being in health insurance. You know, you have different quality leads, and tracking, you know, where those leads are coming from and which ones are higher value for me is super significant, because I might pay, you know, $40 for a live transfer, whereas I'm paying $12 for a shared web lead, but my shared web lead conversion might be 0.2%, whereas my live transfer conversion is 90%. Definitely more cost effective for me to be buying live transfers, even though they're more expensive.
Yeah, and as a small business also, we tend to fall through in a trap of wanting to be in a comfort zone, keep working the channels that we're comfortable with. Unfortunately, a lot of these channels don't last forever. At some point, they dry up. So again, SCORE mentors can come in here and keep reminding the small business owner that you got to look outside the box, and you got to consider all the channels that could potentially be available for you.
Yeah, definitely having that objectivity. Any final comments on lead generation channels and making sure they're scalable?
Right. So again, in the digital world, we're blessed to have these channels that are very scalable. I mean, the numbers are mind-boggling in terms of the number of users on these social media platforms, and people that are doing searches on Google. Millions and millions of searches are happening every minute. So it's definitely the channels are there to enable businesses to scale. It just, you're going to have to figure out your process. You have to figure out your metrics, figure out how to take advantage of them.
And then using that CRM tool to track it all. I think that's the main key here, and obviously the driver for this seminar is just really just use that CRM tool to track those metrics.
Yeah, it's going to be the central place where all the data is kept, all these metrics are kept. You're going to have your dashboard to see everything that's happening. It provides the transparency that every business owner should have, particularly if you have multiple salespeople working for you. So it's an extremely important tool that every small business, regardless how small or large they are, that should have.
Yeah. And, you know, as in closing, any final comments that you have, Nabil, for folks that are here today? And folks, if you've got questions, you can post them in the Q&A, and I'll facilitate that with Nabil as well.
Yeah, again, the message here is try to get your processes defined, streamlined, organized. Obviously, you want to train your staff on how to use them. Use the proper tools, because it's going to make your job a lot easier. Keep track of your metrics. We've given you the essential first order equations that you could use, but you could develop these equations as your business expands, make them a lot more accurate than these first order equations. And as you make them more accurate, you start getting a much better handle on all your channels and how to turn them more profitable, increase your ROI.
So the only question that we had was about, you know, specific CRM that we mentioned at the beginning, and we will be sharing the slides with you and this presentation, as well as that Excel spreadsheet, which is, let me tell you, an amazing tool that Nabil has created there for you. So you'll get that in your email following the session. We hope that this has been helpful for folks. Please, you know, fill out our survey. Let us know what we can do better. And also get a SCORE mentor. If you haven't had the opportunity to work with SCORE, now is your chance. I mean, we have some amazing human beings as human capital resources here. So definitely appreciate all of our mentors. They're the lifeblood of SCORE, and you have an opportunity to work with those folks. But definitely thank you, Nabil, for your time today. We truly appreciate you and taking the time.
We have a couple of minutes. Do you mind if we launch a poll for our audience to complete?
Absolutely. Yeah, for sure.
I'm launching a 4-question. We typically ask that. We just want to get an idea of our audience, where they are in terms of their business status, their revenue size. If you could answer those 4 questions, we'll appreciate it. And if there are any other questions during that time, feel free to post them on the Q&A.
Thanks for attending, Michael. Thanks for your comment. And then Janine had mentioned, I don't know, Nabil, if you want to chat about this a little bit, but one of the individuals had posted that the business isn't dependent upon lifetime sales. It's the referrals that are important. Do you want to address that at all?
Businesses that are dependent on lifetime sales?
Yeah, she said that my business is not dependent upon lifetime sales. It's the referrals that are important.
Yeah, I'm not sure if I understand what she means by lifetime sales. So is it a one-time client that she's getting? Is that what you're understanding?
It sounds that way. It sounds like it might be a one and done.
Yeah, like if I'm buying a house, I mean, obviously I don't buy a house every year.
She said she connects entrepreneurs with virtual professionals. So yeah, it's kind of that one-time connection.
Oh, yes. Hi, Janine. How are you? Yeah, so I mean, that definitely increases the need to have a lead generation process that works for you on a continuous basis. You can't depend on recurring business from your existing clients. You have to invest significantly in constantly creating new leads on an ongoing basis. And you know, it's not an ideal place to be as a small business owner, because every year you're starting anew. If you could somehow figure out how to create a recurring revenue mechanism where instead of you sell your service and it's done, maybe have the client pay you on a recurring basis and figure out a way to generate revenue on a continuous basis, that would be the ideal situation. Otherwise, you're in a constant fight to create leads.
Great advice, Nabil. Thank you. And thanks, folks, for participating in the poll as well. Any other final comments, Nabil, that you have for folks?
No, thank you. That's been terrific, I think, and I look forward to next week's presentation from Jeremy.
Yeah, next week should be really great. I mean, if you folks are interested in learning how to develop an e-commerce site, link to your website, Jeremy's going to take some time next week and really take a deep dive into that. He is such a great teacher. I love going to his workshops because he just makes everything so easy to understand, super relatable. So yeah, tune in next week, same time, same place, and we look forward to that. Got one final question that's come in here. It's just a thank you for our time and information. You're definitely you're welcome, Lourdes. We appreciate you being here. So thanks, Nabil. We'll see you next week.
All right, Paul. Take care. Bye-bye.
Take care.